Video number 178, graphing the cosine function. Well, in order to graph the cosine function, we need to know, just like we did in sine, we need to know the 45-45 right triangle, we need to know the 30-60, and we need to know how to graph the unit circle. There's the unit circle right there. We can see that cosine of 0 is 1, cosine of 90 is 0, and so on. Cosine of 180 is -1, cosine of 270 is 0. Now, we need to know the 45, or at least cosine of 45 degrees is the same thing as sine of 45 degrees. And you get that from the 45, or in other words, the right isosceles triangle. Okay? 45 degrees, opposite over hypotenuse, 1 over root 2 is root 2 over 2, which turns out to be 0.71. Now, cosine of 0 is 1. Okay? Cosine of 90 is 0. Cosine of 180 is -1. Cosine of 270 is 0. And then cosine 360 is back to 1 again. Okay? Now, the stuff in between we can get from the 30-60 and the 45. Now cosine, let's start with cosine 30. Cosine 30 is root 3 over 2, which is about 0.87. So that puts you, here's your 45 perhaps. Okay, here's your 30, here's your 60. Okay, that puts us, well, I probably should have had this come down a little bit early, a little faster off of the 1, but yeah, we're going to be over here about 0.87. 45, cosine 45 is 0.71, and cosine 60 is half. There you go. So there's your first quadrant with the cosine 30, cosine 45, cosine 60. Okay, and what happens is all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these points will happen over here. This would be quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. If you follow through with the unit circle, you'll see all of that happening. Okay, if you know, 30 degrees, you know, here you are, 45, 60, and you would have these ordered pairs that would match up. Everything that's happening in quadrant 1 is happening right here. Go ahead and look for yourself. Okay, now what we want to do in this video as well is we want to take a look at the difference between sine and cosine on the XY axis graph. So let's go ahead and do that now. Oh yeah, and by the way, whenever you put the 2 in front, all it does is multiply the range values by 2. For 2 in front of here, this would just be a 2, that'd be a -2, but everything in between would be the same exact thing. Alright, just makes the graph taller. Now, let's take a look at the basic. Y equals sine x, and y equals cosine x. What happens here, well, sine, if we were to use our unit circle, let's just take a look at the first quadrant. Sine 0 is 0. Okay? And then sine 30 is half. There's 30, 45, 60. Sine 30 is half. Sine 45 is 0.7. And then sine 60 is 0.87. Okay, so we get this going on here, this little curve upward, and of course sine of 90 degrees would be 1. Okay, which by the way, which is actually kind of interesting, what is the definition of sine? It's opposite over hypotenuse. Well, opposite over hypotenuse would be the hypotenuse over itself. That's why sine of 90 is 1. So that's another way of thinking about it. Now, and then and you can check out video 176 and that we get the same patterns to occur. We go through this 0 here. you're going to get the 60 in quadrant 2, the 45 in quadrant 2, the 30 in quadrant 2. You're going to come back down here. We're going to land on -1 as we get over to 270, and we're going to end right here. Okay, this is sine. Now, cosine. Cosine of 0 is 0. Excuse me, cosine of 0 is 1, so we start up here. Cosine 30 is the 0.87, 0.71, and half for 60. So we're going to get this. Okay? There we go. And what happens is you end up down here. Now, okay, we should probably put in the values here. This would have been pi over 2 for 90. This would be, this is just simply pi. That's 180, right? Then 270 is what? 3 pi over 2. And, of course, that's 2 pi. Now, same thing here. We're going to do pi over 2, 90 degrees. 180 degrees, which is pi. 270 is 3 pi over 2. And 360 is 2 pi. Now, we're going to end up down here, right? At 180, we're going to be at -1. We're going to dip back up, and we'll be over here. Okay? So what you're going to have here something like this. Here's what's cool about this, what we need to point out, is that your cosine graph, like we have here, is quite simply the same as sine, except it's moved over. Okay? If you were to move over, it looks like it would be how many degrees? If you moved, see that? How far is that? It's only pi over 2. It's what? 90 degrees. Watch this. If you were to take your unit circle and rotate it 90 degrees, look what you'd have. 1, 0 would be where? 0, 1, right? 0, 1 would be at -1, 0. See that? 0, -1, right? So if you go down 1, if you move to the right, you're going to be -1, 0. So what happens is the cosine and sine then reverse as you move it over 90 degrees and they actually become the same amount. So that's what's cool about this, is that you could just simply move it over 90 degrees and that's how you would end up with the same. So what's the difference between sine and cosine? There's not much of a difference on its graph other than the fact that it's just moved over 90 degrees. It's moved over pi over 2 units to the right, depending upon which one you're talking about. So, questions or concerns, send me an email. Good times.